Hi, welcome. Welcome to the first day of Creative Compass. I am Jessica Abel of Autonomous Creative, and today is day one of the Creative Compass Challenge, where you will learn to put your art and writing and other creative endeavors at the top of your to-do list, not at the bottom. They usually sit. So I'm really glad you're here. This is such important work, and I commend you for showing up for it. We're going to work through together, we're going to work through 5 days of super simple, straightforward exercises that can unlock your ability to start finishing your amazing creative work without having to lock down every other thing in your life first, because that's impossible. For this challenge, each day, I'll do a little bit of teaching here, and then I'm going to open the door to questions. Today's lesson is all about choosing a focus, and I've seen some great questions already in the Q&A. The reason we need to choose a focus for certainly for this week, but in general for this period of time that we're in right now is the pitiless space-time continuum. If we as long as we lack access to near light space travel that would actually change the nature of time, we pretty much have 168 hours a week, period. And we need to be sleeping for like a third of those at least and doing other stuff for another third of those. So there's just a limit. And that means choice is inevitable. Those choices happen all the time, whether you're doing them consciously or not. I mean, you're doing something, you're not doing something else. Those of you who are here live with me right now, you're doing this, you're not doing something else, right? That is a choice that you made. It's a positive choice, it's a conscious choice. You decided to be here. And I'm so glad you did. But we do it all day, every single day. And I would just want to remind you of that, that is at the crux of all of this is choice. It's your choice, you making choices or you not making choices and allowing choices to be made for you. And absolutely want to acknowledge you do not always have total control over what's going to be happening at any time in your life or any time of the day, any time of the week. There are plenty of times and places in which you do not have the choice available to do what you want to be doing, which makes it all the more important that when you do have the choice, that you are making the choice, you're making that conscious choice. I just interviewed Oliver Berkman, who is the author of the book 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals, which is not really a time management book, by the way. But I would highly recommend that book. It was a really, really good interview. The basic idea, though, is that part of our frenzy and overwhelm and feeling like procrastination and all this perfectionism and everything is about trying to like believing in some part of our mind that it's literally that it would be possible to do all the things on your to-do list ever. And it is literally not possible. There's no way to do all those things. There's no way to finish all of the creative projects you wanna do. I'm sorry. I don't wanna be the bearer of bad news, but if you think about it, you just think about how long these things take, it's just not possible. And so until you, like, bring that into yourself and believe it, fully believe it, and live it, choosing one or another can feel like there's constantly gonna be this temptation to do something else and constantly switch gears because it feels like you need to fit that one in, you need to fit this other thing, and you need to fit all the things in. You are obligated somehow to cram them all in. It's not possible, it's not human, right? So, I want, first of all, for you to forgive yourself for the existence of time and that there just is a limit to what you can do as a human being and just, like, let that go. It's not your fault. It is not your fault that there's a limited number of things to do or limited number of minutes in the day and a maximal number of things that you wanna do. Oliver, in his book, talks about a lot of how that comes about and how it's, reinforced by the late capitalist system that we live in. But again, that the most important thing is when we know that we actually are making whatever positive conscious choices we can make within the space that we're able to make them. So that's the big message. If you don't make choices um, consciously and intentionally, if you just keep imagining that you could do everything on your list if you just try hard enough, that is when the self-flagellation and the self-blame just comes roaring out, and, the inner critic, all that other stuff, and that is what really stops you from doing the things that are important to you. It is this feeling that like, yeah, but I should be doing all these other things and getting them all done. That's why the theme of this week is not finishing your to-do list, specifically not finishing it, not trying to finish, but instead choosing the things that you actually want to be doing. Okay. Rationally, you know that's a lie. You cannot finish all those things, but you need to bring it in to yourself and believe it, really feel it in your heart that like it is not your fault, that there's more to do than there is time. Okay. It's late stage capitalism just sucking you dry. Okay. So let's talk about the idea of a dilemma. So now I've said choice, and I believe that you guys are believing me, that you're with me on this, that you have to make choices. Why is it so hard to make choices? Well, there's a lot of different reasons, and we're going to talk about some specific ways to handle choices later in the week. But I am asking you to make a choice today of what you're going to focus on next. So the core of why that's so difficult is an idea that I call dilemma. The idea of dilemma that I learned came really out of literature, came out of storytelling. This idea that a character with a dilemma is faced with conflicting choices. So multiple choices, two or more choices, where each thing sort of cancels the other out in some sense. And you're going to lose something if you choose each, no matter what you choose, right? So I want to give you an example of a dilemma. And I want everybody to think about this and post in the chat. What would you do? How would you handle this dilemma? So imagine, or just imagine this possible thing. There's a family gathering, say like a Sunday afternoon family gathering where family members are going to get together and have a meal together and like a picnic and hang out all afternoon versus a Sunday afternoon where you could be in your writing studio or your, visual art studio of some kind and get in a solid studio session. And the rest of your family is going to be at this party. So you could be left alone. It's a Sunday afternoon. You could have that studio session. That is a dilemma, right? That is a real dilemma. And depending on how you feel about your family, it's a really difficult one or a really easy one. But think about that. Think about the choices that you're making. Think about the two sides of that question. You could go with your family to this, have a picnic, and maybe you feel obligated to do that. You feel like you have to. But you're probably also going to enjoy it and it's going to feel really great. But at the same time you're there, you're going to be thinking about your studio and thinking like, wait, but I could be in my studio all afternoon. And, you know, that would be a really um, wonderful way to spend my afternoon. But if you're in your studio, you're going to feel really guilty about not going and hanging out with your family. And if your family is a really big problem, imagine it's your best friends. It's a group of best friends who are all going to go have a picnic. Okay. Whoever you really love spending time with, put those things against each other and think about what that feels like. I know for me, I've spent so many family and friend gatherings kind of beating myself up for not being in the studio. And I've also spent so many studio evenings beating myself up for not being out doing the thing with the people. And until you consciously decide this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it and this is, I'm willing to take the hit, you're going to have that pull the entire time. There are examples of that every day, almost every minute. There's some dilemma going on. You could be scrolling through TikTok, and that could be very like enjoyable, or a release of tension, or you could be focusing on your new chapbook, which is going to be really difficult, but also very rewarding. And so, how those are things that feels like an easy choice, but in some ways it's not, right? And of course, in that case, you have all kinds of technical things that have been set up in order to suck you into the social media and keep you there that you're having to fight against as well. So even when you're taking time off, I want that to be a conscious decision for you. When you're saying like, I want to be scrolling social media, I want to be watching Netflix, I want to be hanging out with my family, I want to be going out with friends, that needs to be a conscious choice. And very consciously saying, and I do not want to be in my studio or writing or whatever it is right now for this period of time. That will also help relieve that sense of guilt, and that will make coming back to the work easier, because the anxiety of trying to do it all but not consciously deciding what you're going to do, and more importantly what you won't do, that is at the heart of a ton of distraction and procrastination. All right. So uh what I've asked you to do for today is to pick one project to focus on. And the question that I've seen popping up in the question box is how, right? So we do a lot of work on exactly how to do that in the creative focus workshop. And getting to the point where you're fully confident in your decisions does take time and thoughtful consideration. But the core principle I want you to understand, the thing you need to decide is what you're deciding on. What are the criteria that are actually important to you? And I mean literally make lists. Literally write down what is important to you in this moment because it changes depending on where you are in your life and what role this project has for you. But some typical criteria might be, is this necessary for me to make a living? Do I want to build a body of work around this piece or this, project and become known for this kind of thing? Does this project allow me to learn? Does it allow me to travel? Will it let me give back to my community? Will it stretch my abilities? Can I finish it in 2 weeks? Can I have this to be working on for 2 years? Is this the culmination of several other things and will, somehow tie a bunch of stuff together and make it, sort of unlock the possibilities of all those things? The first thing you have to figure out is what are the criteria of success for you? And again, this is something we do in the Creative Focus Workshop. We have several lessons having to do with this that have to do with what works in your life in terms of the way that you're working, also what do you envision for the future and so on. But you can do this on your own. You just have to be willing to sit with it for a little bit and reflect and think about what is it that is actually important to you and what are you using to decide. And I think that's probably what a lot of these questions are going to come down to. So let's get to the question here. All right. All right, I believe this was JM's question that I promoted to the question box before we got started. I'd love to know more about how to determine which of several pressing creative projects to work on. I find that I get distracted between several projects and make less progress as a result. Some of this is likely ADHD, and some of it is feeling committed to all of the above. I've made a choice for this week, but I genuinely need to work on 2 projects a week longer term. All right, so first of all, I want you to ask yourself, why do you need to work on 2 projects a week longer term? I mean, you may, that I'm not gonna say you don't, but why? Like, what are the actual reasons for that? When you look at each of these projects that you have available, you say they're all pressing. Are they pressing for specific criteria? Do they compete on the same criteria? So that these are 2 different projects or 3 different projects that fulfill the same role for you or in your creative life? And if so, which is the one that fulfills other criteria for you? Could be that they're faster, could be that they're more effective in, fulfilling that criteria. Could be that they are deeper and closer to like the core work you want to be doing. And then you have to make that hard choice. Again, if these are multiple projects that are sort of fulfilling the same criteria, then I encourage you to make a choice between them, a real choice, saying like, I am not going to work on this one until this one's finished. Um, because they're all going in the same direction. Now, if they're going in different directions, so you have different things that are sort of for different reasons, then I think you need to look at the criteria and decide among them, what are the things that are more important to you and less important to you among these criteria? And that's the way to start sorting these things out. Now, I mean, we all work on multiple projects at the same time, but I think it's very important to try not to have multiple projects in the same domain that compete with each other for the exact same type of time, the exact same sort of um, headspace that you're in. So I just moved and I have tons of house projects, lots, and they're all simultaneously and they're all pretty much equally important, or a lot of them are anyway. And what am I gonna work on? Well, I have to pick one thing and go through it and finish it in order to appreciate like, to get the benefits from it, right? And so in time that I'm working on house stuff, I'm gonna pick one thing at a time and I'm gonna work on that. That doesn't mean I'm not gonna do other stuff in between and other parts of my day. There's a limited number of hours I have, so I have to make some choices there too, but, those are, like, they're in parallel tracks, and so hopefully that will help a little bit. But I do think it's really important to do the best you can to go one at a time when you're working on projects that are really parallel and in the same headspace. I used to try to do multiple books at the same time, like write different books, and one of them's nonfiction, one of them's fiction, one of them's like, whatever. Everything took literally years longer than it needed to because of that. I really encourage you to don't be like me. That's, yeah, pretty much that. All right. Got a question here uh, from Virginia. When talking about choosing a creative project, do you mean a specific piece of art, for example? I'm struggling with this because my creative projects are actually creative skills I want to develop: lettering, drawing, watercolor, collaging. So, not sure if I should pick one skill and then develop or come up with a project for it, or if choosing one skill is enough for now. I think that definitely uh, depends on like if these multiple skills are all for getting to one. Like, they're gonna be incorporated into one project, right? So you have projects that are gonna have lettering, drawing, watercoloring, collaging, like, in the one project, and you need all those skills. Then, assuming you are far enough along with them to work on a project, I encourage you to put that skill building inside a project container and just start working on it. And when you run up against something you don't know how to do, you're not good enough at that thing, you could do a little bit of, developmental work over here and then come back and work on it some more. But I really think that, projectizing in some sense, like giving it some boundaries is a good way to learn skills, but learn them in the context of how you're actually going to use them so that you're developing the right elements of those skills and actually answering questions that you have. When we do the Creative Engine Masterclass, that's what we call the collect phase, the learning phase, or the research phase, all that other stuff. And a lot of creative people get stuck there because they feel like they have to master something before they're allowed to move on. And you aren't. You don't have to master the thing. You just need to get enough together that you can start moving and start making things. That is how you develop a flexible and functional skill set. So I recommend you think about that. If there's something where when you're talking about learning lettering, drawing, watercolor, collage, like, you don't want to do it in, like, just so you have a skill that doesn't apply to anything. So think about what you want to apply it to and sort of put it in that container. Um, I see another question here from Hansel that kind of got it in as a comment, so I'm just going to answer that now. Um, he says, "I procrastinate watching videos on YouTube about how not to procrastinate. Some advice." Well, um, those videos will not help you. So don't watch them. I mean, the only thing I can say about something like YouTube is you can definitely put, screen time limits on yourself. Like, you can set up, um, mechanical, like, apps and things on, certainly on, like, Apple devices, you can set up screen time and you can put limits on YouTube time, whatever. Other than that, I think you just need to tell yourself, like, this is not, like, the way you stop procrastinating is by making decisions, basically. If you make these conscious decisions and the kinds of things we're gonna be doing this week and you put these things in place, uh, that is what actually for the most part, prevents procrastination. I mean, there are other things that come into it, obviously, but, um, you don't need a lot of hacks or anything like that. You just need some very, very basic decision making and then putting some little supports and systems in place so that you can move forward with your work. Okay. All right, Virginia also asks, "How do you know what to let go of and when?" Um, Following the conversation about never having enough time to finish all the things in life. Well, that's what we're talking about here. I think I've answered that in the beginning of when I was talking, which is this whole idea of criteria, that you have to look at what are the criteria for how you wanna be spending your time? What does success look like to you? And I don't mean success in, like, a worldly way, I mean, like, the way you wanna be living. What does that look like to you? Really, like, pull away from the specifics of the project completely and think, "How do I wanna be living in a year or 2 years or 5 years? How do I want to be walking down the street? How do I wanna be in my studio? How do I want it to feel? How do I want to have a relationship professionally with this work or not?" Right? So if you decide those kinds of things, then, the decision about what to let go of and when becomes, it's never easy, but it's much more clear because you can look at each individual project and go like, "Well, how does that match up with these goals?" And a lot of times it doesn't at all. There's just no match at all. And that can really help bring clarity to that question of what to give up. The big piece in this is sunk costs, where if you've done a lot of work on something, giving it up can feel extra painful. Again, thinking about do I still want to be doing this in a year? Do I still want to have done this do I care about whether I finish this thing or not? Or am I just doing it because it's something I've already been doing? That can really accountability and community can really help with that. So people can kind of bolster you and help you. And that's something we do in the Autonomous Creative Collective. I see a lot of members here. I know that they know that. Like, if you post like, "Oh, I need to do this, but I can't manage it," and having the right people around you to kind of help you and push you forward, it's a very big help for that. Okay, a lot of questions here. Let's see what we can get through. Okay, so Meg asks a question about deciding between challenging important projects versus something I know I can complete, but I'm unsure I'll feel proud of because it's not ambitious enough. Should they go for the big fish despite a good chance they'll fail, or go for a win that may be a distraction? The big project feels forced, but maybe that's the resistance of manifesting itself. Um, if it feels forced, I would definitely look at this criteria question and really think about like, okay, I've set this big kind of ambitious goal for myself, but does it actually align with what I want out of my life? Or am I doing it out of feeling like I should because it's a thing that people, she says she's a poet, so poets do. And therefore I want to meet this goal. Does the smaller project feel like something that's like, would be really satisfying to do? Um, do you need practice finishing? Like, if you need practice finishing, you're not feeling really confident about finishing, pick an easy win. Don't make it hard for yourself for no reason at all. Okay. Chris Chris asks, I find myself back in this position again of wanting to complete a personal creative project, knowing the steps that it takes, having more than enough ability to do what it takes, and kicking myself for not being further down the road of the project. I decided to set the bar really low and do the smallest possible version of the project in hopes of gaining confidence or in hopes of breaking through whatever this block is. Chris, that sounds like a great idea. Set the bar low. You can always do more later if you feel like this is great and I want to add to it. But yes, set the bar low and just make it as simple as possible to get through it. And the most important thing I would say to you is try to forgive yourself for not having perfect control over this. This is something that, I mean, everybody here is struggling with this. Everybody here is having these same kinds of questions and issues around how do they keep focus on things? How do they keep moving? Um, why do they feel so much resistance around something they love? I mean, this is literally what we're talking about here. So you are not alone. And it's important to try to put down that heavy burden of feeling like it's your fault somehow or like you did a bad thing somehow. It just makes it harder to get back to it. So, we're going to talk tomorrow about creative habit building. And that I think is going to be really helpful for you in terms of thinking about how can you set the bar as low as humanly possible and start moving on this project in a way that feels good and then celebrate that small progress as you go along. Okay. Nikki says, um, that they're neurodiverse with autistic and executive dysfunction issues. And I'm presuming that is what it is causing the dilemma. To choose one specific major creative project over another, that's what I would really appreciate some input on. If you have any secret tips or advice I could apply that might help, anything involving multiple choices and making a decision, I just find extremely difficult. I would also love to find something that would be helpful in being time poor due to health issues. Okay, so if you have less time because of health issues, making these choices is even more important because you have less time to devote to them. What I'm hearing you say, Nikki, is basically exactly what I've been talking about here is like, how do I make these choices? Well, you make the choices by knowing the criteria on which you're making the choices. So the first thing I would say to you is before you try to make this choice, spend an hour. Here in Philly, it's beautiful outside today. Go outside, listen to the birds, bring a notebook, and think about what do you want your life to look like in a year or 2 years or 5 years in terms of the way that you're engaging with your creative work, in terms of how you're spending your time, spending your days. What do you want? Make a list of the things that feel aligned with that, that are supportive of that idea of yourself in the future. Um, if you have some specific projects, you could say, you could make a list of criteria, say your top 5 criteria and say, and literally, and we do this in the Creative Focus Workshop, tick them off. This is a 5 out of 5. This is a 1 out of 5, and add up the numbers. Get a little bit of systematization around the decision making, and it takes some of the emotion out of it and some of the blame out of it. And so, just allowing yourself to think about what's actually important to you. And, I've had members in the Creative Focus Workshop who have gone through this process multiple times. And in fact, we have a great article on our blog from Lisa Frubeis about this process, where she kept coming back to this idea of criteria over and over again. And eventually realized she was missing some major criteria. Like, she wanted to do something that was stretching her artistic ability. She wanted to do something where she was learning. Some people want to do stuff that make them free, like their time free, like they have more time available, or they can do it wherever they want, or they can, they can go wherever they want to do it. There's lots of different criteria, but if you don't know what your criteria are, you can't make this decision. You're just going to feel like, when I don't know what I'm deciding on, the feeling in my body is like it's up here. Like, the decision's like, I need this, and I'm trying to focus on like what feels right to me, and I can't know because I don't know what I'm deciding on. The surface uh, description of the project does not help me make that decision. You need to know the inside of the project, like, what's it for? Why are you doing it? What's it going to look like in practice? That's what really is going to help. Lou just posted the link, which is just jessicaable.com, trying to do it all / trying to do it all. That is the link for the blog post I just mentioned. All right. So Ben asks, what about starting a creative project? For example, writing a book while you are marketing and promoting a project you're already finished with. How do you create space between the two activities or manage to do them in parallel? Well, this relates to the domains question, because one has to be in a different headspace to do marketing for a project than for creating a project. It's not radically different, which makes it a little bit problematic, but it is different, right? There's more of an exploratory kind of inward sense with the creative project. There's more of a, like, thinking about the audience. What does the audience need? Um, you know, how can I help an audience member understand what's in this project for them? Those are very different kind of headspaces to be in. Iterate like the sort of expression of those things may look very similar. So I'm writing something here, I'm writing something over here, and that's where it gets sticky. And what I would say for something like that, and I do think you probably do want to do those when you're marketing a project, when you're promoting a project. I definitely think giving that solo time and your full attention for a while is really important, to acknowledge that it is a full-fledged project. It is a full project. It should take over all of your time and attention for a while. But at some point, you're still going to be doing promotion for this thing, and you need to start your next thing. And in that case, I would think about theming your days and have days that you do one thing and days that you do the other thing, um, for a period of time. And really, as a pro creative, as a professional creative, there's never a time when you don't need to be doing any marketing or promotion at all for your creative business, whether that's like pitching podcasts to be a guest, or like, sending out press releases and contacting reporters, or writing emails to your email list, or whatever it is that you're doing to, you know, finding speaking gigs, whatever it is. Like, there are all those things that need to happen that are life things in terms of creating and supporting a creative business, that need to happen in parallel with your creative work. And that's when you really need to think about domains and think about how do you sort of physically separate these things, and make sure you have clear, uh, devoted time for generative creative work without having finished everything else, because you're not going to finish it. Right? Same thing, to-do list stuff. Um, you're not going to finish the marketing and then have a clear calendar for your creative work. They're going to have to live in parallel to a certain extent. There are things that are going to get dropped and that aren't going to get done. And it's up to you to decide which things are making it on the calendar, which things are not making it on the calendar. That's up to you. I'm going to answer Lindsay's question here. How many hours per day at creative work with a job, family, bill paying, cooking, exercise, etc., is a reasonable expectation? Lindsay, let me ask you the question. How many hours per day of creative work, when you have a job, a family, bill paying, cooking, exercise, etc., is a reasonable expectation for you? How many hours? You're the only one who can answer that question. I wish I could give you an answer like, well, what's really reasonable is doing 3 hours a day. And If you're not sleeping, that's fine. You should just do it. But all that's going to do is set yourself up for, self-blame and just misery. So I will not do that. You need to look at your own calendar and make some decisions about, just like I recommend time tracking, time tracking, not in a um, judgmental kind of time blocking way of like, make sure you're doing this, make sure you're doing that. But attentiveness. I talked about this in the interview with Oliver Berkman. The idea of being attentive to your calendar and seeing like, what am I actually doing with my day? How much time does this take? And there may be things in your calendar you could do less of or do them less well. Make a decision that you're going to do it less well. Um, there may be things you can share responsibility for with other people, and that may be a negotiation. And we can talk about that. We're going to be doing how some work on how to say no on Wednesday, and so that's definitely relevant here. So maybe if you're like my little assignment to you, Lindsay, would be think about that today. Think about what you want to say no to that you're currently doing, um, and then on Wednesday, your assignment will be to actually say some no's and actually have that renegotiation a little bit. So, it's not a, yeah, it's a very, very, uh, personal question. Even saying stuff like, "You have a job and family." Well, do you have to commute to your job, or are you remote? And so you have 2 extra hours a day or whatever it is. Family, do you have toddlers? Do you have teenagers? Do you have all of those things change with your phase of life, with your situation. And so my most important thing I wanna say here, overall, is all of this comes from you. Right? It all comes from you. Comes from you paying attention to what matters to you, from you paying attention to what's real in your life, what you really have to do, what you may not really have to do, but you're doing anyway, and trying to bring those things into alignment with conscious decision. So I see Lindsay over here in the chat saying 1 hour. I mean, if you can fit an hour in with all that, awesome. You definitely like having an hour a day of creative time in a life that's that busy is a triumph. Congratulations. You're doing a great job. Maybe occasionally on the weekend, you'll get a couple hours. Maybe you'll get your partner to take the kids and you've got a free morning, or you can, you know, run away from that family gathering I mentioned earlier and have a few hours to yourself. And things will change over time. There's gonna be times when you have more and times when you have less. But having an hour a day can be absolutely life-changing. There's no reason why it can't be. And we're gonna talk tomorrow about habits and how to build a habit. And if that's an issue for you, or like getting started is an issue for you, then this is gonna be helpful. So that's, I think, a really good time to leave this for today. I want you to choose a creative project to commit to. And if you are having trouble with this, think about criteria. Think about what the criteria are that make something work for you or not work for you. Okay. What projects are you going to put on hold? It doesn't have to be forever, but it does have to be until you have open space in your calendar because you've finished whatever it is you're doing. Okay. And I will see you tomorrow for Creative Compass Day 2, where we will identify where and when this work is going to happen in your life. And thank you for being here today. I'm Jessica Abel from Autonomous Creative. Bye bye. See you next time.